Take a slow, deep breath. Imagine that we are sitting together beside a small, crackling campfire. The sky above is painted with the soft colors of the setting sun, and slowly the first stars begin to peek out. Around us, the world feels hushed. Yet if you listen carefully, you can catch the gentle rustle of the wind moving through the trees, the distant whisper of leaves brushing against each other. Have you ever stopped to think about the words we are using in this very moment? Every word you speak carries with it a long history, a journey that stretches across time and space. Language is far more than a simple tool for communication. It is alive, constantly growing, changing, and moving, carried across mountains, rivers, and oceans by the people who speak it. Long ago, thousands upon thousands of years ago, the language we now call English did not exist. There were no books, no schools, no dictionaries to guide a learner. There were only people. People living in various regions of Europe and Asia, speaking the language that scholars today call Proto-Indo-European. It is quite a mouthful, isn't it? Think of it instead as the great-great-grandparent of countless languages we know today. From this ancient root, a multitude of branches began to grow, spreading out like the limbs of a tree. One branch grew into Greek. Another became Latin, which eventually gave rise to French, Spanish, and other Romance languages. Yet another branch evolved into the Germanic languages, from which English would eventually emerge. In those early times, words were like whispers carried through the night. People spoke about the things closest to their hearts, the sun rising over the horizon, the rivers and waters they depended on, the warmth of family, the food they grew and shared. If you could somehow travel back to that era, their words would sound strange and unfamiliar, yet there would be something deeply human in the sounds, a connection that resonates across millennia. These early utterances were the seeds from which English would eventually grow. Simple, strong, honest. They were the words of people striving to survive, to express their lives, their hopes, and their fears. They had no idea that one day their quiet conversations would travel across the world, reaching ears they could never have imagined. As we prepare to trace the journey of English, I want you to think about your own voice. Each time you speak English, you are joining a story that began thousands of years ago. You are part of a long chain of people who sought to be understood, to share their experiences with others. The story of English is one of movement and change, of encounters and exchanges, of conflicts and collaborations. It is a story that continues today, written anew by every conversation, every word, every person who chooses to speak it. Are you ready to step back to the very beginnings? Imagine a vast gray sea stretching before you. It is the 5th century, and the mighty Roman Empire is crumbling. Along the shores of northern Europe, in lands we now call Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands, men are hauling their long wooden boats into the chilly waters. These men are the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. They are both farmers and warriors, accustomed to hard work and harder battles. Across the water, they gaze at a green, inviting island, Britain. When these groups finally set foot on British soil, they brought with them more than just swords, shields, and tools. They brought their language, the earliest forms of what we now call Old English. But here's a secret. If you were to hear Old English today, it would likely sound completely foreign to your ears. It was raw, strong, and unrefined, echoing the power of waves crashing against rocky cliffs. Listen closely to some of its words. The word for house was hus, man was mun, and friend was friend. You can already sense the connection to the English we speak today. These words are the skeleton of the language, short, forceful, and deeply human. For centuries, these tribes lived scattered across Britain.
Around their fires, they told stories of great heroes, monsters, and legendary deeds. They called the ocean the whale road and the sun the sky candle. Their descriptions were vivid, imaginative, and tied closely to the natural world around them. Life, however, was far from calm. In the 8th century, new visitors arrived from the north, fierce and formidable, the Vikings. These northern raiders would bring not only conflict and change, but also words, customs, and ideas that would blend into the growing tapestry of Old English. Their arrival marked another chapter in the journey of the language, a reminder that English, like the people who spoke it, was always evolving, always moving forward, shaped by every new voice that touched its shores. The story of English is not just the story of words, it is the story of people, their struggles, their adventures, their connections, and their imaginations. And now, as we sit here together, watching the night settle over the campfire, we become part of that story, carrying forward the whispers of thousands of years past, ready to continue the journey into the future. They came from Scandinavia, and they brought their own words with them. Words like sky, skin, leg, and window come from these Viking invaders. Imagine two neighbors living next to each other. One speaks the language of the Saxons, and the other speaks the language of the Vikings. At first, they might not understand each other, but slowly, over many years, their words began to mix. They realized that they needed to talk, to trade, to farm, and to live. Because of this, English began to lose some of its difficult grammar. It became simpler because people from different backgrounds needed to understand one another. Old English was like a young tree. It was growing deep roots in the soil of Britain. It was the language of the earth, the sea, and the home. It was the language of the common people. But soon, a great storm was coming from across the sea, a storm that would change English forever. The year is 1066.
It is perhaps the most important date in the history of the English language. A man named William, the Duke of Normandy, crossed the English Channel from France. He won a great battle and became the King of England. William did not speak English. He spoke French. And for the next 300 years, the leaders of England, the judges, and the rich lords all spoke French. English was pushed down. It became the language of the poor, the farmers, and the servants. Imagine a world where there are two different languages for everything. In the fields, the farmers looked after the animals. They used Old English words, pig, cow, and sheep. But in the beautiful stone castles, the rich people ate the meat of those animals. They used French words, pork, beef, and mutton. Have you ever wondered why English has so many words for the same thing? This is why. We have house, Old English, and mansion, French. We have start, Old English, and commence, French. Because of the French influence, English became a double language. We have simple words for everyday life and fancy words for more important things. Thousands of French words entered English during this time. Words about law, art, fashion, and food. But English did not die. It lived in the hearts and the homes of the common people. It was like a river flowing under the ice. While the king spoke French, the language of the people was changing. It was becoming Middle English. This was a time of great mixing. The grammar of Old English was falling away, making the language more flexible. People were choosing the best words from both languages. It was a confusing time, but it was also a time of great creativity. Think about how difficult it must have been. If you were a shopkeeper, you might need to speak a little bit of French to sell to a lord and a lot of English to talk to your neighbors. English was learning how to adapt. It was learning how to survive. By the time English became the main language again, it was completely transformed. It was no longer just a Germanic tongue. It was a beautiful, messy, and rich mix of Northern European and French sounds. It was ready to find its true voice.
As we move into the 1300s and 1400s, something very strange began to happen to the English language. It wasn't about new words this time. It was about how people sounded. This period is known as the Great Vowel Shift. Imagine you have a friend who lives in a different city. You talk to them on the phone every day for 20 years. Slowly, without noticing it, your friend's accent begins to change. After 20 years, they sound like a completely different person. This is what happened to English. Before this time, the word bite sounded like beat. The word out sounded like oot. The word feet sounded like fate. Can you imagine that? It would sound very strange to our ears today. Why did this happen? No one knows for sure. Perhaps it was because people were moving from the countryside into the big cities like London. When different accents meet, they often change. It was a slow, mysterious transformation that lasted for over 200 years. During this time, a great writer named Geoffrey Chaucer wrote the Canterbury Tales. He wrote in Middle English, the language of the people. His work showed that English could be just as beautiful and poetic as French or Latin. But even as the sounds were changing, the way we wrote the words stayed the same. This is why English spelling is so difficult today. We often spell words based on how they sounded before the Great Vowel Shift. Think about the word night. Why do we have a K and a GH? A long time ago, people actually pronounced those letters. They would say knicht. But as the sounds shifted, we stopped saying the sounds, but we kept the letters. English was like a teenager growing up. It was changing its voice, finding its identity, and becoming more mature. It was moving away from the old ways and stepping into a new era. By the end of this shift, English started to sound more like the language we recognize today. It was becoming modern English. It was a language that was ready for the stage, ready for the world, and ready for a man who would change it forever. We have reached the late 1500s. The world is changing fast. This is the Renaissance, a time of rebirth. People are exploring the world, studying science, and thinking new thoughts. And to express these thoughts, they needed more words. Enter William Shakespeare. You have probably heard his name. He was a playwright, but more importantly, he was a lover of words. He didn't just use the English language, he played with it. He invented over 1,700 words that we still use today. Words like lonely, hurry, generous, and bedroom were all used or created by him. When you say you are in a pickle or heart of gold, you are quoting Shakespeare. He showed us that English could be flexible, emotional, and incredibly deep. But there was another invention that was just as important as Shakespeare: the printing press. Before the printing press, books were written by hand. They were very expensive, and very few people could read. When William Caxton brought the printing press to England, everything changed. Suddenly, books could be made quickly and cheaply. But there was a problem. People in different parts of England spelled words in different ways. The people running the printing presses had to decide, how do we spell this word so everyone can read it? They chose the spelling used in London. This began the standardization of English. It was the first time that English started to have rules. Imagine the excitement! For the first time, a person in the north of England and a person in the south could read the same book and understand the same words. Knowledge began to spread faster than ever before. This was the era of early modern English. The language was becoming stable. The King James Bible was printed, which gave English a beautiful, formal rhythm that stayed in the language for centuries. English was now a powerful tool for art, science, and religion. It was strong, it was organized, and it was ready to travel. And travel it did, on large wooden ships across the vast and dangerous Atlantic Ocean. Now, my friends, let's leave the shores of England. Imagine the year 1607. A group of people are crowded onto ships, sailing toward a new world. They are traveling to North America, carrying their hopes, their dreams, and of course, their English. When they landed in places like Jamestown and Plymouth, they found a land that was very different from the green fields of England. They saw animals and plants they had never seen before. How do you name something you have never seen? You listen to the people who are already there.
The English settlers began to learn words from the Native American tribes. Words like skunk, moose, raccoon, and hickory entered the English language. Life in America was hard. The settlers were far away from the standard English of London. They had to adapt. They lived in a wild, vast landscape, and their language began to reflect that freedom and that struggle. For a long time, the English spoken in America and the English spoken in Britain were almost the same. In fact, for many years, Americans and British people sounded more like each other than they do now. But as the years passed, the two groups became separated by more than just an ocean. They were separated by their lives. In America, people from many different parts of Europe began to arrive. They brought sounds from Germany, Holland, and Africa. The English in America began to grow in its own direction. It was like a branch of a tree that was planted in new soil. It had the same DNA as the original tree, but the different sun and different water made it grow a little differently. Have you ever noticed how American English feels a bit more direct? This came from the spirit of the people who moved there, people who wanted to start a new life and leave the old traditions behind. By the time the United States became an independent country, its version of English was a symbol of its identity. It was no longer just English in America, it was becoming American English. But how did it become so different from the British version? Let's look closer. You might ask, why do we have color and color? Why elevator and lift? It's a great question. The answer lies with a man named Noah Webster. In the late 1700s, after the American Revolution, Noah Webster wanted America to have its own version of the language, so he wrote a dictionary. Webster decided to simplify English spelling for Americans. He took the U out of color and honor. He changed the RE in theater to ER. He wanted the spelling to be more logical and American. This is why today we have these two different systems of spelling. But it wasn't just spelling. It was also the words themselves. Think about the car. In the United Kingdom, they say bonnet and boot. In the United States, we say hood and trunk. This happened because many new inventions, like the car and the railroad, appeared after the two countries were separated. Each country came up with its own names for these new things. And then there's the pronunciation. Have you noticed the letter R? In most parts of the United States, we pronounce the R at the end of words like car or teacher. In many parts of England, they do not. Surprisingly, back in the 1700s, almost everyone in England pronounced that R. But in the 1800s, it became fashionable, in London, to drop the R sound. Because London was the center of power, that way of speaking spread across the UK. But it didn't travel to America. So, in some ways, American English actually kept some of the older sounds of English that the British people changed. Despite these differences, we must remember, it is the same language. It is like two brothers who grew up in different cities. They look different and they have different hobbies, but they are still family. They can still sit down and have a long, deep conversation. Whether you learn British English or American English, you are learning the same history. You are learning the same bones. The differences are just the clothes the language wears. We have traveled from ancient roots to the modern day. Today,
English is more than just the language of two countries. It is the global tongue. Think about this. There are about 1.5 billion people in the world who speak English. But here's the amazing part. Most of those people are not native speakers. Most of them are people just like you, who learned English as a second or third language. English no longer belongs to England or America. It belongs to the world. It belongs to the pilot in Brazil talking to a tower in Tokyo. It belongs to the scientist in Germany sharing research with a colleague in India. In this digital age, English is changing faster than ever. Because of the internet, we are creating new words every day. Think about words like blog, app, selfie, or emoji. These words didn't exist 20 years ago, but now everyone knows them. And English is still a hungry language. It loves to borrow words from other cultures. We eat sushi, Japanese, we do yoga, Sanskrit, and we enjoy a safari, Swahili. English is like a giant sponge, soaking up the beauty of every culture it touches. Because so many people speak it, English is also becoming global English. It is a version of the language that is clear, simple, and used for international communication. It focuses on being understood rather than having a perfect accent. What does the future hold? Some people think English will continue to split into many different versions. Others think the internet will keep us all speaking the same way. But one thing is certain. English will keep moving. It will keep adapting to new technology and new ways of living. It will never stay still because the people who speak it never stay still. You are now a part of this global community. When you learn English, you are not just learning grammar and vocabulary, you are getting a key that opens doors to millions of people, thousands of books, and endless opportunities. My friends, we have come to the end of our journey through time. We have seen English grow from a few Germanic tribes into a global language that connects the world. Think back to those early whispers we talked about at the beginning. Those whispers have become a roar. They have traveled on wooden boats, they have been printed on paper, and now they travel as digital signals through the air. English is a living legacy. It is a language built on layers of history. It has the strength of the Saxons, the elegance of the French, the spirit of Shakespeare, and the energy of the modern world. Sometimes learning English can feel difficult. You might get frustrated with the irregular verbs or the strange spellings. But remember the story we have told today. English is a messy language because it has a messy history. It is a language that was made by people who were trying to survive, trying to connect, and trying to create. It was not made in a laboratory. It was made in the fields, in the markets, and on the stages. Every time you speak, you are adding your own voice to this history. Your accent, your mistakes, and your successes are all part of the evolution of English. You are not just a student, you are a participant in a story that is thousands of years old. As we sit here by our imaginary fire, I hope you feel a sense of pride. You are learning the most successful mixing language in human history. You are learning a language that values connection over perfection. So, don't be afraid to use your voice. Don't be afraid to make the language your own. English has always changed for the people who use it, and it will change for you too. The story of English is not over. It is being written right now, in this moment. It is being written by you as you listen and learn. Thank you for traveling with me through the history of this beautiful living tongue. The fire is low now, and our journey for today is finished. But your journey with English, that is just beginning.